ago, my beloved Tundra was in the body shop getting some work done, and I was relegated to driving our spare car, which happens to be this '01 MR2 Spyder. If you're watching this, chances are you or somebody you know has one of these and might be interested to know where the name comes from. It was actually the project name during the design phase back in the early 80s. It stands for Midship Roadster 2-Passenger, with midship referring to the placement of the engine. So I digress. My first day in the car, after 10 minutes of excruciating contortionism to squeeze my 6'5" frame into the thing, I hit the road and quickly realized that the speakers were shot. So I went ahead and ordered some online that were set to fit the MR2, and today we're going to put them in. The door panels are pretty easy to get off, actually. I was always afraid of them, but after doing my Tundra a few years ago, I realized they're actually pretty easy. There's only 4 screws that hold these things on, and the trick is knowing where they are. So we have 1 screw here behind this plug, 1 screw here at the top of the grab bar, 1 screw behind the door handle, and another screw at the bottom of the grab bar. So we'll take your specially designed interior service tool and carefully pop this little plug off. There we go. And underneath is a screw. So we'll pull that puppy out. You want to kind of try to remember where these go because they're not all the same. This one's relatively easy because that plug I just took off actually fits on the screw head. So next we'll take the access cover off the door handle. Alright, so this one is actually a 10mm bolt. So we'll just simply take that out. I've done other Toyotas before, and sometimes these are a Phillips head screw, but sometimes they are a bolt. But this grab bar is designed to take a lot of stress, so it's going to be pretty beefy, whatever it is. And of course we drop that down there, but it'll be easy to get to once we get the door panel off. Now again, we take our special interior removal tool, and this guy just pops off, just like that, just snaps on, snaps off. And that one is actually a Phillips head. That's actually a 10mm bolt with a Phillips head crosscut in it. Get that out of the way. And then the last one is a little bit tricky. It's inside the door handle. You got to pop this little cover off. And it's actually attached by a little tether, so it's not going to come all the way off. It's just going to flip out of the way. And somebody's already done us the favor of removing that screw. But typically there would be another Phillips head screw in there. And to get this off, it actually slides back and then out. But there are little catches up here on top of these switches. There we go. And I did break that one. Fear not, these are easily available. Or you could probably glue it back on. But you can get those on eBay for 12 bucks or so. But when they get old, they get brittle, so we got to be very careful with that in that regard. So there's that. Okay, next, all we have left holding the door panel on are some clips in the back. And they just simply pull out. So we're going to pop one out, get your fingers behind it, and just give it a gentle tug, and they all come out. And from there, the little squeegee rain catch here just hooks over the top of the door. So here are those clips. They just simply pop in and pop out. Okay. So now we have access to the speaker. Just take off the little connector And we got 3. Again, these are both 10mm and or Phillips head bolts that hold it on. There's all 3 of those. And then this thing should come right out. Got a little glue on it or something, but there you go. So there's our speaker. Okay, we've moved into the workbench, a little easier to work. And here is the speaker that I got off the internet. Easy open package, obviously. This comes with a grill that we're not going to use. So there's the speaker. And one would have thought that this speaker somehow screwed or fastened into this housing. But closer inspection shows us that it does not. It's actually integral. It's made as one complete piece. So this presents some issues. First of all, this is not going to be a direct, easy replacement. So we have, I guess, probably 3 options. One is to go back to the original factory speaker, and that's going to be either a used one, which is probably not going to be in much better shape than this, or a brand new one from the factory, which is going to have a lot of zeros on the price. Number 2, the hole in the door is actually big enough that this could screw right to the metal door. I have some problems with that because this is designed in such a way that they've managed the flow, if you will, of these sound waves. You can see the indentation in this gasket where it's actually sealed against the door panel, and the back shrouding also serves a purpose. And this manages the sound so that we're not getting a bunch of errant sound waves bouncing around inside the door and between the door panel and the door itself. This also serves to support the door panel. If that doesn't press against it, the door panel is just going to be flopping around. So that option's not attractive to me anyway. So number 3 is, even if I go with option number A, I'm not going to be using this original housing again. So number 3, in my mind, is to try to adapt this to where I can put that speaker in it. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to cut these supports and then take that speaker out completely, and then try to install this one into that housing from the front. So first thing we want to do is get this gasket off of here and try to salvage it so we can use it again. Now this is just a fiber, it's like stacked fiber board, so we can peel that off of there, and it stays relatively intact. We're going to lose one layer of the many hundreds of plies in there, but I think we can live with that. Okay, so that takes care of that because we're going to need that again. Our next step is to go ahead and cut these supports out of here. So I'm going to clamp it up on the vise. This is relatively secure. I don't want to break it. So you could probably use several different tools to do this, maybe a hacksaw blade or a coping saw or a jigsaw. I'm going to go with a multi-tool. This is like a vibrating saw blade, just because I have it handy, and it's pretty quick and easy, although a little bit noisy. So here we go. So we've got them all loose now. Let's just go ahead and rip all this out. Okay, so there's your old speaker into the file 13. So we're going to use this connector again, but probably, I'm not sure if it's going to be in the housing or not, but I need to solder on it, so let's get it out of there. There we go. So I just had to push down that far enough to get that to let go and push it out. So let's clean all this out. And let's see how the speaker fits. So it doesn't quite nest in there the way I'd like. As you can see, it's up on one side. And that's because the frame of the speaker is interfering with this inside edge of the housing. So what we're going to do is take our multi-tool again, and we're going to trim off that inside edge. And again, there's more different tools you could use. You use a rotary grinder, probably even a router, sanding drum, but I've got the multi-tool handy. I don't really care much how it looks because it's all going to be covered up before we're finished anyway. Do the whole thing. Okay, so I've got that cut out. And like I said, it's not pretty, but it works. And just test the speakers. See, now it fits down in there nice and flush the way it should. Okay. Before we go about fastening that in there, however, we need to consider the wiring. Now, it's important that speakers be in phase. And by that I mean the speakers have polarity. And this is basically an electromagnet, and when it gets power, that cone moves in and out, and that's what produces your sound waves. If your left and right speakers are out of phase, in other words, the polarity is reversed, as the right speaker is pushing in, the left speaker is pushing out. Whereas if they're in phase, they should be going in and out together. So we're going to make sure we get the connections correct. You'll notice that one of the terminals on the speaker is thin, and the other one's thick. Or fat, wide, let's call it. And on your speaker wires, you've got a red wire, which is copper. And we're going to do the red to red, which also happens to be the fat terminal. And this guy, we cut off the old speakers the same way. There's one wide one, one narrow one. So in order to keep everything in phase, we're going to stay with that, where the red or positive is on the wide terminal, and the negative is on the black terminal. So let me get these soldered up, and then we'll proceed with getting the speaker mounted. All right, so now it's time to mount the speaker into the housing. So we set it in there, but quickly figured out that the speaker is deeper than the housing, so it doesn't sit flat. So what I'm going to do is use this spacer and set the housing on that to allow room for that magnet to protrude. So it sits in there nice and tight. One of these sheet metal screws, which are actually a little bit too long, but I happen to have them handy. And we're just going to screw through one of the mounting holes right through the plastic housing. And this is probably, I'm going to say a number 8 screw maybe. Now I don't want to run this down tight yet, because if I do, it's going to push this side down and that side up. So I'll leave it loose. And we're going to turn this around and put one 180 degrees on the other side. back over, tighten this one down. And flip it around and tighten this one down. So we got nice even torque. And it's in there nice and flat. And just for goodwill, I'm going to go ahead and pop a couple more screws in there. Not sure that we need them, but that'll make sure we don't have any rattles or anything that we don't like. And one on the other side. So there we go. Now we're going to find out that these screws, even though they're close to the housing, where we're going to have to cut a little notch in the car door to allow for the clearance on those screws. You could use shorter ones, but they're still going to stick out a little bit, so I don't think there's any way of getting around that. So we're going to put this in the door and mark where those screws are, and then cut a little notch. Just going to take a little marker and mark the location of each of those screws. Alright, so we got our notches cut. I ran this little wire with a connector on it up and out through the one of the door holes to make sure it doesn't get bound up anywhere. And now we just put the speaker housing back in. And there we go. And we just simply reinstall the screws. Again, I usually leave them a little bit loose till we get them all in, make sure everything's going to fit right. So there we go. I'm pretty pleased with that. That looks as good as a factory installation. And we just reconnect our wires here. Now, as far as the speaker, what we have left is to put the gasket on there, or the spacer. I've got a tube of silicone here that I'm sure I'm the only one that's ever had this problem. I put the non-clogged cap back on, and of course 2 weeks later it's clogged up. So rather than throw it away, I'm just going to snip a corner of it off here and just put a few dabs. Maybe snip a little bit bigger corner off. We don't need a lot here, just enough to hold it in place while we're working on the door panel. Carefully press that in place. I guess we could have done that on a workbench and let it set up for a little while, but it's pretty tacky stuff. It's just basic 100% silicone caulk is all it is. So the speaker's in. I ended up replacing the connector here because one of the pins had broken off inside. So I just direct wired it. That's up to you guys whether you want to do it that way or not. So now we're ready to put the panel back on. By the way, there is actually a tweeter in each of these doors too. And I hadn't actually tackled that yet because I haven't found a viable replacement without going back to the factory. But that's probably going to be my next project, is to try to find some of those. So this thing, as I said earlier, it's got a lip on it that just hooks over the top of the door. So as long as it's in the right position, pop it back in. So I'm going to start with the little one with the plug. And as I said, the plug just sort of pops back over the top of that screw. And then the next one. Alright, so put the screw back in the grab handle. My big fat fingers is easier said than done. And it didn't take. Actually, I guess it did. Go. Now the door panel, simply smack it. Pop all those clips back in. Put your trim pieces back on. There we go. Right place at the right time. So the only thing we got left is my door handle, which didn't have a screw in it. So I'm going to have to try to find one of those, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and order a new bezel for it. But in essence, there you go. That's how you make non-factory speakers fit factory doors.